Picture this. You come home after a long day, keys in hand, only to find your own front door won't open. Not because you lost your keys, not because the lock is broken, but because someone else changed them. Someone who has no legal right to be in your house. That's exactly what happened to me 3 months ago, and what I discovered next will blow your mind. The people living in my house weren't just trespassers. They had a piece of paper that they claimed gave them the right to stay. But here's the kicker. I'm about to show you exactly how I got my house back, using a legal loophole that most people don't even know exists. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to do if this nightmare ever happens to you. Because trust me, it's happening to homeowners across the country right now. So buckle up, because this story is about to take some serious turns that you won't see coming. Let me paint you the full picture of how this insanity started. I had been out of town for exactly 2 weeks visiting my sick grandmother in another state. 2 weeks! That's all it took for my entire life to get turned upside down. When I pulled into my driveway that Tuesday evening, the first thing I noticed was different curtains in my living room window. My heart started racing immediately because I knew something was wrong. Those weren't my curtains. Those were cheap, floral things that looked like they came from a thrift store. I walked up to my front door, and that's when I saw it. A shiny new deadbolt that definitely wasn't there when I left. My key wouldn't even go into the lock. I'm standing there on my own porch, fumbling with my keys like some kind of criminal, when suddenly the door opens. And there's this woman, probably in her 40s, looking at me like I'm the one who doesn't belong there. She's holding a cup of coffee, wearing a bathrobe, acting like she owns the place. The conversation that followed was absolutely surreal. She tells me, and I'm not making this up, that she has every right to be there because she found the house abandoned. Abandoned! I had been gone for 14 days. She claimed that under squatters' rights, or adverse possession as the legal term goes, she could establish residency. The audacity was beyond anything I had ever experienced in my life. But here's where it gets even crazier. She actually had paperwork. This woman had gone to some legal aid office and filed documents claiming adverse possession of my property. She showed me these official-looking forms with stamps and everything. My brain couldn't process what was happening. How does someone just decide to move into your house and then have legal documents to back it up? I immediately called the police, thinking this would be resolved in 5 minutes. The officer arrives, looks at her paperwork, looks at my deed, and then delivers the news that made my blood run cold. He says this is a civil matter, not a criminal one, and that I need to go through the courts to resolve it. The courts! To get back into my own house that I've been paying a mortgage on for 6 years. The woman, who I later learned was named Patricia, had apparently been watching my house. She knew my routine, knew I traveled for work sometimes, and had been planning this whole thing. She had researched the laws, prepared her documents, and executed this plan like some kind of professional house thief. The level of premeditation was absolutely mind-blowing. That first night, I had to sleep in my car in my own driveway. Can you imagine the humiliation? My neighbors are walking by, probably thinking I'm some kind of deadbeat who got evicted from his own home. I'm texting my boss that I need time off to deal with a family emergency, because how do you even explain this situation to people? The next morning, I started making calls to lawyers. Do you know what most of them told me? That these cases can take months to resolve. Months! Some even said it could take up to a year, depending on how well Patricia had documented her claim. I'm thinking about my mortgage payments, my utilities, my homeowner's insurance, all still coming out of my bank account for a house I can't even enter. Patricia had done her homework, and she wasn't some random crazy person. She had researched the specific laws in our state about adverse possession. She knew that if she could prove she was living there openly and continuously, maintaining the property and paying utilities, she could eventually have a legitimate claim to ownership. The fact that she had only been there 2 weeks didn't matter. She was building her case from day one. By the end of that first week, I realized I was dealing with something much bigger than just a simple trespassing situation. This was a calculated legal maneuver, and Patricia was playing a game where she knew the rules better than I did. But what she didn't know was that I was about to learn those rules too, and I was going to use them against her in ways she never saw coming. The first lawyer I hired was absolutely useless. This guy took my $3,000 retainer and then basically told me to wait it out. His strategy was to file for an unlawful detainer and hope Patricia would just leave voluntarily. When I asked him about the timeline, he casually mentioned it could take 4 to 6 months. 4 to 6 months of me paying rent somewhere else, while also paying my mortgage. The financial burden was crushing, but the emotional toll was even worse. I started doing my own research, because clearly I couldn't rely on this lawyer. What I discovered about squatters' rights laws absolutely infuriated me. In most states, if someone occupies your property openly and notoriously for a specific period of time, they can actually gain legal ownership. The time periods vary by state. Sometimes it's as little as 5 years, sometimes it's 20. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. The clock starts ticking from day one. Patricia was smart about this whole thing. She had utility bills transferred into her name within the first week. She was maintaining the yard, bringing in mail, and even had the nerve to put up a small garden in my backyard. Every single action was calculated to show that she was treating the property as her own. She understood that adverse possession requires continuous, open, and hostile occupation of the property. The breakthrough came when I started researching Patricia herself. I hired a private investigator, which cost me another $1,500, but it was worth every penny. We discovered that this wasn't Patricia's first rodeo. She had attempted this same scheme at 2 other properties in neighboring counties. One case was still pending in court, and the other had been dismissed when the homeowner proved she had falsified some of her documentation. This information changed everything. My second lawyer, who actually knew what he was doing, immediately filed motions to have Patricia's adverse possession claim dismissed based on her pattern of fraudulent behavior. We also discovered that Patricia had a criminal history that included fraud and identity theft. Suddenly, this wasn't just a civil matter anymore. We had grounds to involve law enforcement on criminal charges. But Patricia wasn't going down without a fight. She countersued me for harassment and emotional distress. According to her legal filing, my attempts to reclaim my own property were causing her psychological damage. The legal system was so twisted that the person illegally occupying my house could sue me for trying to get it back. This whole experience was like living in some kind of alternate reality where nothing made sense. The court proceedings were a nightmare. Patricia had clearly gotten advice from someone who knew the system well. She showed up to every hearing with meticulously prepared documents. She had photographs showing the improvements she had made to the property. She had receipts for utilities and maintenance. She even had character witnesses testifying that she was a responsible tenant who deserved to stay. Meanwhile, I'm bleeding money on legal fees, temporary housing, and still paying all the expenses for a house I can't live in. The mortgage company didn't care about my situation. They wanted their monthly payment regardless. The insurance company started asking questions about why the property was occupied by someone other than the policyholder. Every aspect of my financial life was being affected by this situation. The turning point came during the third court hearing. My lawyer presented evidence that Patricia had been researching my travel patterns through social media. She had been following my Facebook and Instagram posts to determine when I would be out of town for extended periods. This showed clear premeditation and planning, which undermined her claim that she had simply found an abandoned property. By this point, 3 months had passed since I first discovered Patricia in my house. 3 months of legal battles, thousands of dollars in fees, and the constant stress of not knowing when I would get my home back. But I was about to discover a legal strategy that would end this nightmare much faster than anyone expected, and it was something that Patricia and her advisors had completely overlooked. The game changer came from the most unexpected source, my neighbor Mrs. Johnson, who was 83 years old and had been watching this whole drama unfold from her front window. She knocked on my temporary apartment door one evening and handed me a manila envelope filled with photographs and handwritten notes. This woman had been documenting Patricia's activities with the dedication of a private investigator. Mrs. Johnson had photographed Patricia breaking into my house on the very first day. She had pictures of Patricia using tools to change my locks. Most importantly, she had captured Patricia removing my personal belongings and putting them in trash bags on the curb. This was crucial evidence because it proved that Patricia knew the house was occupied and had deliberately disposed of my property. Under adverse possession laws, you can't just throw out the owner's belongings. That's theft and destruction of property. Armed with this new evidence, my lawyer filed an emergency motion for immediate possession of the property. We argued that Patricia had committed multiple criminal acts, including breaking and entering, theft, and destruction of property. The photographs clearly showed her forcing entry into a secured property and deliberately destroying evidence of my residency. This went far beyond any legitimate adverse possession claim. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I'll never forget walking into that courtroom and seeing Patricia's face when my lawyer started presenting Mrs. Johnson's photographs. Her whole confident demeanor crumbled instantly. She knew she was caught red-handed, and there was no way to explain away photographic evidence of her criminal behavior. The judge was clearly fed up with Patricia's scheme by this point. After reviewing the evidence, he didn't just dismiss her adverse possession claim. He ordered her immediate removal from the property and referred the case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. He also ordered Patricia to pay my legal fees and damages for the 3 months I was displaced from my home. But here's where the story gets even better. Remember how I mentioned Patricia had tried this scam before? Well, the district attorney decided to make an example out of her. She was charged with multiple felonies across 3 counties, including fraud, theft, breaking and entering, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. Apparently, Patricia was part of a larger network of people running this scam on properties throughout the region. The day I got my keys back was absolutely surreal. The sheriff's department supervised Patricia's removal from my property, and I finally walked back into my own house after 3 months of hell. She had actually taken decent care of the place, which was almost more infuriating because it showed how calculated her whole plan was. She wasn't just some desperate person looking for shelter. She was running a sophisticated con game. Patricia ended up pleading guilty to multiple charges and was sentenced to 2 years in prison plus restitution. The restitution order covered all of my legal fees, lost wages, temporary housing costs, and additional damages for emotional distress. The total came to over $47,000. Of course, getting money from someone who makes a living stealing houses is its own challenge, but at least the legal victory was complete. The most satisfying part was that Patricia's conviction helped other homeowners who were dealing with similar situations. The district attorney's office used our case as precedent to go after the entire network of house thieves. Within 6 months, they had arrested 8 other people running the same scam, and several pending adverse possession cases were immediately dismissed. Looking back on this whole experience, I learned that knowledge really is power when it comes to protecting your property rights. If I had known from day one what I learned over those 3 months, I could have resolved this situation much faster and cheaper. That's why I'm sharing this story with you, because this scam is happening all over the country, and most people have no idea how to fight back. And sometimes, an 83-year-old neighbor with a camera can be your most powerful ally in the fight to protect what's rightfully yours.